Alrighty, folks, we are going to have the one and only Mr. Brian Adamson share with us a quick story on how folks are fumbling opportunities left, right, and center. Brian, what do you got?
Yeah, so I saw recently the amount of people that's leaving the workplace to become entrepreneurs, right? That's a whole another video for in and of itself, okay? But I was reminded of a couple years ago, I got to meet David Green. Are you familiar with who David Green is?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Right. So owner of Hobby Lobby, for those that don't know, just a tremendous guy. Right. And I got an opportunity a couple years ago to meet him in Oklahoma City. We spent 2 days with he and his family in a small group setting. And so I got to pick his brain a lot. Right now, just for context, Hobby Lobby, I think 2 years ago, hit their 50-year anniversary. They, for the last at least 10 years, have been doing somewhere between $3 to $5 billion in revenue. And the Green family and foundation donates 50% of their earnings to the kingdom efforts, right? So whether that be to the church, to just all kind of philanthropic efforts, okay? So I got an opportunity to ask David a question. I'm like, I'm just curious. I said 2 things. One, as an entrepreneur, we become so easily distracted. Right. So one, how did you even stay with something for 50 years? And then 2, when did you know that was it? Right. And he looked at me, and at this time, David was probably 81. You couldn't tell talking to the guy, but in stature, I think he was about 81.
Okay.
And he said, Brian, to be honest, one, I never dreamt of anything this big, never wanted anything this big. He said, what I got really good at was at the age of about 15, 16, I was a store manager of another like crafts company. And so I was so excited to get that responsibility and to be entrusted with that level of responsibility that I got to open and close the place every day. And he said, and it was the scripture, Colossians 3:23, do all your work as if you're doing it for the Lord, not for man's approval, because you know that your reward comes from the Lord. He said, that scripture, I've embodied that for the last 60 plus years. And I said, that's interesting. When you talk to billionaires, many of them, because it's probably the 4th one that I've met now personally, many of them never aspire to be billionaires.
Right.
Right. What I got from what he said, though, was the biggest problem that we have in society today. Oftentimes we endure today's assignment for tomorrow's desire. But from what he shared with me, that Colossians 3:23 says, do all your work as if you're doing it for the Lord, not for man's approval. We got to stop doing just enough in our current assignment by thinking that's going to get us to our next one. We have to over-index, and we have to make sure that we maximize the current assignment, because if we understand the real blessing comes from how well we manage that assignment to get to the next one that we really want.
No, I think there's a lot in that. And again, I think there is, something about social media today that rubs me the wrong way. There's lots of things, but in this case, there's a lot of people that are saying things like, I hate my job, lying flat is a thing, quiet quitting, all of these things. And you guys don't realize that your job is a key. It's not a prison. Right? If you just look at your job as a key to a better life, a better something, you should be maximized. You should learn public speaking. Most employers will train you to do new and cool things, and you could take those gifts and lessons everywhere. And there's just, one of the things that I got right was I always knew I wasn't an entrepreneur. Right. I'd go to school, get a good job, blah, blah, blah. Right. But I worked myself into a career that was commission based. My, what they called OTE, on target earnings, was a couple of hundred, but I was only paid 100. Right. That's what I had to live on, because everything else was variable. And if you don't perform, you get fired, and you don't see the couple hundred. And I just went all in and learned as much as I could, and worked harder than anyone else. And I remember at one point I was invited into a technical part of the organization called sales consultants, sometimes called sales engineers. And everybody in that job had a computer degree, was an engineer, just because it was a technical sale.
Mm-hmm.
And I got into it by hook or by crook. And I'm a finance guy. I'm a finance geek. So I remember having to practice the demo, I don't know, 100 times in a room with nobody. Full on 45-minute demo in the product, bouncing around just to feel comfortable.
Yeah.
And the long story of that is I made more as a sales engineer than most salespeople because I was that good, even though my leverage plan was nothing like a salesperson. I was able to help the number one and number two sales guy each like 3 years in a row. Like my guys were the number one and number two. And, again, that doesn't happen without hard work and stewardship and showing up early, staying late, practicing in a full-on room with nobody in it. It's your job is the key, not a prison. I wish more people would get that.
Yeah, no, that's good, Mike. I think to take that even a step further, right? The first distinction that was made clear to me in talking to David Green was that he viewed his job as a blessing from the Lord, not as an opportunity from an employer. And part of the challenge, depending on where your faith lies, right? And I'm not by any means pushing my faith on anybody, but for those that are in the faith, you have to first make that distinction that if you believe that every perfect gift comes from him and all good things come from him, then you have to view your job none the same. Although you may view it differently. To Mike's point, you view it as a prison versus a key. He gave it to you for the purposes of making it a key. The expenses that you went out and have gotten has now made it a prison. Exactly. Because if you kept your expenses low enough, then you could absolutely leverage that as a key or as your first business partner to then position yourself to go through the next thing, as Mike and I both did. To piggyback Mike's point. So when I worked in corporate America for the 12 years that I did, I was an operations manager for a plastics company. And so, like yourself, Mike, I had a base, but then I had incentives for quarterly performance bonuses. So we were incentivized in that way. And in my particular department, the injection molding department, there was 23 facilities in North America that had an injection molding department. Every year, we were in the top 2 or 3, right? Some years 1, some years 2, some years 3. But every year that I was in that position, we were in the top 2 or 3 of all in North America. Why? Because of this very same thing that you talked about. Like, I had to make sure that I managed and stewarded well over that season, regardless of how long that it was. And watch this. This is where the blessing comes in. When I could see that I was going to leave work, right? When I started like planning my escape route, right? I had done such a good job at building up success equity that allowed me to empower others that were below me. I delegated a lot of my responsibility and I trained up people well enough to where as I started to focus more on my real estate efforts, like I was going to work, putting in 2-3 hours of work, and the rest of the time I spent on my laptop working on my business. And it wasn't to shortchange my job. It was just the fact that I built up so much success equity that it became so second nature to me that it allowed me the margin to then work on the thing that I really wanted to do, and that was going to free me. And so imagine being in a situation where you go in and you punch the clock and you do bare minimum every day. You always got somebody micromanaging. You always got somebody watching over your shoulder. You're never going to have the margin to go and do the thing that could possibly free you, because all you do is give just enough every time you walk into the door.
Yeah. The other thing, the other harsh truth of this is if you're the just enough person, and eventually we will have a recession, guess who gets shown the door first?
Facts.
Right? You're already chosen a lifestyle where you're living above your means. You already see your job as a prison. Then we go through one little hiccup in the economy and you get shown the door. I mean, this gets bad really fast if you're comfortable, not doing anything.
For sure. And that's a really good point. You should make yourself unfireable at work. and I don't even know if that's a real word or not, but y'all get the point.
It
Like,
is
you should
today.
make yourself, right. It is today. You should make yourself as unfireable as possible. You should make them think long and hard when they look at that list of who they need to cut, that you are one that they can't afford to.
No, absolutely.
Right. And to your point, Mike, while you don't see yourself as an entrepreneur, I beg to differ, but you don't see yourself as an entrepreneur. Here's the reality. Many see themselves as entrepreneurs that shouldn't. And that's not,
No,
when I
big
say that,
time.
it's not disparaging, but here's what everybody should see themselves as: an intrapreneur. At
Tell me more.
minimum, you may not be society has told everybody entrepreneurship is the sexy thing, right?
Yeah.
When, as a real entrepreneur, you understand you're responsible for other people in their lives. You take all the financial risk on the front end. You don't know if it's going to work or not. You're the one that endure all the sleepless nights and the payroll that you don't know if you're going to make and all the other stuff that comes along with it, right? Everybody not built and wired for that. But I believe everybody is built and wired to be an entrepreneur, which is somebody that specializes in such a way that could come in and help this entrepreneur grow and scale the business, get paid a salary, plus earn yourself a position of equity within the company. So now you get the benefits of ownership without having to take the risks that this entrepreneur does day in and day out. And everybody can position themselves to do that if you make a habit of everything Mike said at the opening of this, while at your job, learning all the ancillary and peripheral skills that maybe aren't necessarily aligned with your day-to-day function, right? So get a part of these, C-level meetings when you can, and just be a fly on the wall. Understand, why do they make certain decisions that they make in the operations meeting? Understanding what it costs to have benefits and healthcare and all these things that we take for granted just because we see them as line items on our check. Start to investigate that stuff. Start to discover those things, because there's so many entrepreneurs out there that's looking for COOs, chief operating officers, and just consultants that can come in and basically connect themselves with their existing business to show them how they can make it better in all of these areas. And regardless of what the product or service is business. And there's certain core fundamentals: marketing, advertisement, sales, operations. These things really won't change a whole lot from business to business. So if you can start learning those things and making yourself more valuable, you could then have the freedom of an entrepreneur, but de-risk it in the form of an entrepreneur.
Yeah. I just think there's a lot of life, and you're helping me see these things, because I see you as an entrepreneur, and again, I just don't see myself as that, but you're helping me understand that maybe I am, right? It's at least now. Maybe I wasn't, before I retired, but it's really interesting to see how your mind works, because you take input and you process stuff so quickly. It's fun for me to watch.
I appreciate it.
Yeah.
I don't know in my mind that it's happening as fast as it is, but it sounds like I'm on the right track. So I'm gonna keep going.
There you go. It's pretty wild. I just love this conversation. So give me this passage or scripture again one more time.
Yes. So it's Colossians 3:23. And here's the thing, right? So before, on my social media handle, I think I had Philippians 4:13 up there before, which is, I can do all things through Christ who gives me strength. After I had that meeting with David Green a couple of years ago, I immediately changed my one scripture in my social footprint to Colossians 3:23. And I literally get up and embody that every day, try to, because when you think about it, right, back to this entrepreneurial conversation, you don't have anybody tapping you on the shoulder telling you what to do. Yeah. So if you don't get up every day in Colossians 3:23, that thing, and do all your work as if you're doing it for something greater than you, then it leaves you too susceptible to cut corners, to not put extra context in that email because you can get away with a one-liner, to not, go that extra mile to reach out to that person, although you don't feel like it. So it has to be something. So if I know I'm reporting to headquarters, then I pursue my day differently, right? Yeah. There's things that I could do even as an entrepreneur that will move the needle enough to get everybody paid. But I got a bigger purpose, and I got a bigger responsibility than just collecting a check. I'm actually supposed to be impacting lives and not just earning income.
Yeah. Folks, at the end of the day, I really suggest that you look at what you're doing today as a key, not a prison. Life just gets better when you don't feel like you're in a prison. I cannot imagine waking up every day going, I'm going to go to prison. And some of you are acting like that's happening. Can you imagine just living that way? No, I just
I can
can't
tell
imagine.
you, I've been in those seasons, Mike. Like when I lost my first, when I sold off my first portfolio in a down market back in 2014, 15. That was the first time while I've been in corporate that I didn't really have an answer outside of corporate. So that was the first time where I felt the walls kind of closing in on me as if it was a prison, because I always had something else going on outside of work that I always looked at work as a business partner because I treated it as such. I would leverage my 401k to make other investments. I always treated it as a business partner. And I got to that place where every day I got up and I'm like, going to prison, man. But if you can change your perspective, you can change your situation. I just had to shift. I had to shift my perspective back again to what it really was. And the truth is I wasn't helping myself, because in that same season, we were the most cruise going folks in our early 30s and late 20s. We kept doing things to distract us from the life we didn't want, instead of doing the things to create the life that we did want. And I think that's the biggest problem for most people, is that we try to anesthetize the life that we have. And so we just buy stuff and spend money on stuff to try to distract us from it. But instead of escaping the life you don't want, just go create the one that you do, which is going to require some short-term sacrifice, which is going to require you to shift your perspective. But if you can do those things, then as Dave Ramsey says, if you live like no one else now, you'll live like no one else later.
With that, we will leave it. Brian, you can find Brian at on Instagram, Brian Adamson Official. And what is your YouTube channel called again? Same thing?
Same thing.
Brian Adamson Official. Go give him a follow. Brian, you're amazing, man. Thanks.
Appreciate you, bro.